Well, my story starts in 2015 when, yes, I became the internet's favorite pregnant man. I'm also one of the internet's only pregnant man, so it's a low bar, but it's still my claim to fame. But of course, my trans pregnancy story does not actually start in 2017. It starts when I was a child, growing up in a very small town called Lancaster, California, in the middle of the Mojave Desert. Are any of you from small towns? Yeah, solidarity. And it's funny, I don't really remember being that aware of gender as a child. It was kind of like there were boys, there were girls, and there were kids. And that was me. There wasn't much to rebel against in my family. We were kind of all allowed to be whatever we wanted. And so even though I was technically a girl, I didn't really have a feeling of discomfort around that until puberty hit. And I recognize that puberty is hard for everyone, so I'm not trying to get into a contest with you all here. But I bet mine was worse. It's hard to be pressured by the world to act like a young woman for everyone. It just sucks. When you are actually a man, though, it sucks even more. And it sucks even more when you don't have any language to describe this thing inside of you that feels broken. I just knew that there was something wrong and I didn't know how to fix it. I did theater a lot when I was a kid, which will surprise none of you. I'm that theatrical person. And so in high school, my friends used to jokingly say that I was a gay man trapped in a woman's body. LOL! Nailed it! But that feeling of being literally trapped in the wrong body became worse and worse and worse as I got older and older. Until finally there was sort of a fever pitch that I hit. And I realized that I really couldn't stay alive in this body anymore. And I'm really lucky because around that time I met a transgender person. And I realized there was a solution to this problem. I wasn't broken, I was just trans. There was a word for this thing, and there was a solution. I could transition, and I could live as a transgender man, and I could be happy. And so that's what I did. I started taking testosterone, which quickly made me look like I do now, like every other gay man in Portland. So good. But in my mind, I was really choosing between being happy and being normal. Because when I transitioned, I knew that I was choosing between being my authentic self and being happy and ever having what we would think of as a normal life, ever finding someone that would love me, ever finding a family, ever having community love and support. Because when I started transitioning around 2002, which in the trans community we consider the dark ages, I didn't have any models of what my life could be. And in fact, when I came out to my mother as transgender, she said to me, "Oh, sweetheart, who will ever love you?" And she was not trying to be mean. She was genuinely concerned that her beloved child would never be loved in the way that she loved me. And I didn't know if I would ever have that either. But I transitioned anyway. And I thought, when have I been most happy in my life? And I remembered it was when I did theater. And so I applied to one and only one performing arts school. And luckily for me, I got accepted. And I got to go and transition while I was in performing arts school. And I got to play all my dream roles as a man this time, as opposed to when I was a kid. And I got to be surrounded by a community of love and support. And actually, the reason I told you about my mom is she comes back in this part. She came down from Canada to watch me in the production of Annie, which is me in the picture there. Maybe you've heard of the musical Annie? Does anyone want to guess how many times I've been in the musical Annie? 5 times. My mom's joke is that by the time I die, I will have played every character in the whole musical. But anyway, she came down to see me in the play, still very cautious about me being transgender and thinking that maybe this was a phase that I would outgrow one day. But she waited in the lobby for me to come out, and I came out the stage door surrounded by all the people that I was in the play with and all my teachers from school. And they asked me, "Oh, Trystan, who is this?" And I said, "Oh, this is my mom." And all my teachers said, "Oh, we love your son. You must be so proud of him." And it was the first time that she saw that there was a possibility for a different kind of future for me than she ever imagined. It was the first time I saw it too. And I left performing arts school having learned how to tell a story, how to open myself up to strangers, how to be honest and authentic and not afraid of being vulnerable. I learned that being vulnerable and opening yourself up makes you powerful, and it gives other people the permission to open up to you as well. And I took those skills and I went on to become a professional pissed off queer. That wasn't my official title, but that's basically what I was. I got to travel the country and help communities that were facing attacks at the ballot box, specifically against LGBT people. Now, I don't know if you all know this, but in most states in America today, it's perfectly legal to fire someone from their job, kick them out of their house, kick them out of school, boot them out of a restaurant just because they're transgender. It's perfectly legal. And I got to travel around the country and change that in communities all over the country. And by the time the No on Proposition 8 campaign came along, which was in 2008 in California, when all the voters of California went to decide whether or not gay and lesbian couples should be able to marry the person they love, by the time that campaign came around, I was part of an elite team of people whose job it was to find homophobic or transphobic voters and change their minds. It's as easy as it sounds. No, it's hard. It's hard. But the good news is it's a science. There is science around how we change our minds. There is science around where homophobia, transphobia, bias, bigotry, there's a science behind how that happens, why it happens, and how you undo it. And I learned a few really critical things about how you actually change someone's mind on an issue, even an issue they feel so strongly about as whether trans people should be fired from their jobs or whether two men should be able to get married. And I learned that when you're working to change someone's mind, there are really three main things you're doing. So number one, you are listening to them. And for me, this is a little bit of a mental hack, because when I listen to someone, when I'm curious and open to who they are, I'm not vilifying them. I'm not thinking of myself as separate from them. I'm being in relationship with them. I'm learning who they are. I'm learning what makes them tick. And in my mind, I'm sort of disassembling that part of me that wants to see them as a bad person. Right? We're just two human beings on a journey together. So I'm listening for who they are. What do they care about? What are their values? And I'm a nerd, and so I think about this as a Venn diagram. So I'm really listening to them, trying to figure out who are they here, and then I'm matching that up with here, who I am here, and I'm finding that overlap. What do we have in common? Where do we share connection? And then that's where I go in the conversation. What are the things that we have in common? What connects us as a person? And then it was my job to then use super accessible language. Like, you will never hear me use the word cis heteronormativity. No one knows what that means. Do not use this word when you're trying to change someone's mind, because they don't know what it means. And when we use words like that that are inaccessible, we're telling someone again that they are other from us. And for someone who is used to not being the other, this is a very, very disconcerting experience that I'm not interested in putting them through, because I've experienced it. And so I just would use super accessible language to explain to them why it is that two people who are in love and are dedicated to each other and want to form a family should be able to do so and should be able to get married. And it will not surprise you when I tell you that I really loved this job. It was hard. It's hard to be told over and over and over again that who you are is wrong, even disgusting or bad. That's hard. It was also hard because for most of these campaigns, I was working for relationship recognition or marriage, and I was pretty sure that I would never be able to get married. Not because I didn't want to, I did, and not because I didn't think I was marriage material, because obviously I am. But because I just didn't think that it was possible for a trans person to find love. And I went through several years thinking that it was just never going to happen for me. And I'm really, really lucky, because 2 short years after we lost the No on 8 campaign and the voters, millions of voters in California voted to take away marriage from gay and lesbian couples, I met the person that I would later go on to marry. His name is Biff. Isn't he cute? He's just as cute now. We're still together. But when I first met him, I knew right away that he was the person I was supposed to be with. If it was up to me, the first words I would have said were, "Where the hell have you been?" Because I'd been waiting for him, you know. And I don't know about you all, but when someone's a do-gooder, I find that very sexy. And I was like, oh, so what do you do? And he's like, I manage a homeless shelter. And I was like, oh. This is very hot. I'm like, what do you do there? And he's like, oh, I wrote the first ever trans-inclusive policy for a homeless shelter in the state of California. That's who you marry. Yeah. Yes. And we started dating and we fell in love. He's what they call cisgender, by the way. He's not transgender. He's just a regular gay guy. He's actually not regular. He's special. Don't tell him that I said that. But and we had a really amazing, really a perfect first year of getting to know each other and falling in love. It was my first ever experience of feeling perfect with someone. And like I didn't have to change anything to be with him. And we had so much fun. We were in our 20s, and we traveled and volunteered together and did all kinds of amazing things. And then one day we got a phone call that his sister wasn't able to take care of her toddlers anymore, and could they come and live with us for a little while? And I don't know about you, but in my family, I was raised that when kids need you, you show up. And, you know, Biff said to me, well, first of all, slow down, Trystan. But we've never really talked about forever or getting married or any of that stuff. But if we go and we pick up these kids, they may end up staying with us forever. And if we go and we pick them up, I need you to commit to being with me for the next 18 years. Even if you're not in love with me, even if it's not fun anymore. Because we're not taking these kids out of an unstable situation and putting them into another unstable situation. Do you commit? Do you commit to being with me for the next 18 years? And I said, fuck yes, I do. I never thought you'd ask. And so overnight, we became parents to Riley and Haley, who were age 3 and age 1 at the time, and who had been really badly abused and neglected. And I have a foster sister who's younger than me, and I know what happens to kids in the foster system. Sometimes it works out great, and sometimes it's really hard, and I couldn't imagine these kids going into that situation. And so overnight, we became parents to 2 kids, which was not our plan, and I don't recommend, by the way. You should plan ahead if you're going to have kids, but life happens. And we didn't know how to be parents. I mean, who really does, to be honest? But our community rallied around us because that's what LGBT people do. We show up. And we did get married. I proposed to Biff, and we got married in my parents' backyard. And we committed our lives to each of the kids as well. The ceremony, we did our own vows. We did a vow to each of the kids. For a while, Riley would tell people that he was married. Which was weird. Kids say the darndest things. And then in 2015, after years of legal battle and court dates, convincing judges and social workers that even though we may not look like a traditional family, we have as much love as any other family, and we could be really wonderful parents to these amazing kids that we had fallen in love with. And in 2015, our adoption became final, and we became their forever family. And after becoming a parent so suddenly, with literally no preparation, I really started to imagine what would it be like to grow our family, but on our own terms. And at that point in time, around 2015, a ton of my friends who are transgender men were having babies. So I definitely knew it was possible. In fact, my friend Matt, I believe, is the first ever man who has given birth post-transition or after having been on hormones, and his son will turn 21 this year. So for 2 decades, transgender men have been making babies. They are smarter than me, and they did not tell anyone. But it's been happening. So I knew anecdotally it was possible, but I mentioned that I'm a nerd, and so I dug into the data. And it turns out that there are actually quite a few studies, academically rigorous, peer-reviewed studies on trans fertility. And it turns out that testosterone, when it comes to fertility, operates similar to hormonal birth control. It stops your ovulation, but then when you stop taking it, the uterus kind of wakes up from a slumber. I imagine Sleeping Beauty in there. And then is like, would you like some eggs? That's not science, by the way. It's not how it works. But it kind of is. And the studies show us that not just my friends, but hundreds of transgender men all over the world have done what really every LGBT person who's ever had a family has done, which is to look at what they have available and build a family around it. And even though we were two men, I have a uterus and eggs, and Biff has another part. So you do the math, you know? And so I went to the doctor, and they were like, yeah, this is totally possible. It's totally healthy for you to do it. And so I stopped taking my hormones, and we started thinking about really doing this. And for me, it stopped being just a matter of practicality. This is how we can build a family. And it started feeling like a way that I could really reject some of the ideas that I'd been told about transgender people. One of the myths that people hear about transgender people or transgender men like me is that we wish we were born traditionally male, and that we spend all of our life trying to get to that place. That's the end goal. And you know, that's not true. In fact, I have no desire to be like cisgender or non-transgender men. No offense, but I don't want to be like you. I think that what makes me different makes me powerful. And I could spend my whole life freaking out and feeling sad about the things that my body can't do. It's not like my dad's body. It's not like Biff's body. Or I could look at the thing that it can do that theirs can't, which is to create life. And so it started to feel like a really radical way that I could embrace the thing that makes me different and kind of give a middle finger to everyone who wants me to blend in and to pretend like I'm not different. And so I stopped taking my hormones, and we did experience a very early pregnancy loss. And then a few months went by, and we got pregnant. And this time it stuck. And Biff was like, do not put that slide up there because they will know that that is your pee. So I'm sorry. That's my pee. It's worth it for the impact, I think. And we told all of our friends and family, you know, we're expecting a baby. And we chose not to tell anyone actually how it was that we were expecting a baby because we wanted to keep it really, really private. But what had happened was, actually, it was around that time that we had really incredible examples of transgender women of color speaking publicly about their experiences. And I watched an interview with Janet Mock and Katie Couric, where Katie Couric asked her very invasive questions about her body. Do you feel more like a woman after you had your breast implants? Those kinds of things. And I watched Janet Mock so gracefully and effortlessly redirect Katie Couric and tell her about why those questions aren't appropriate. And I really started to feel ashamed that as a white transgender man living in Portland, Oregon, I was allowing the most marginalized members of my community to bear the burden of educating our society on who we are. It was unacceptable to me. And I thought if there is literally a single person on the planet who is better situated to tell a new trans story, it's me. I'm the one that has to do it. I'm in Portland. I have all these privileges and protections that other trans people don't. I don't know if you all know this, but according to the best evidence we have, the average life expectancy for a trans person in America today is 35. I'm 36. I'm an elder in my community at 36 years old. Transgender people are more likely to lose their lives as a result of hate crimes of any other demographic in America. How dare I not step into the spotlight and try to change this conversation and show people who we really are? Because yes, there is pain in our community, but there is also power and pride and resilience and love and family. And I wanted to tell that story. So we went to a podcast that we had been on when we did our adoption called The Longest Shortest Time. It's a parenting podcast. It's really good. It's really good. And we trusted them to tell our story, and they told it they cut out all the parts where I sounded like an idiot. They cut out the part where Biff said the word vaginal. He's less interested in messaging than I am. And after that podcast aired, it was really exciting. I thought, this is great. A few hundred people will hear our story. My mom can send this to her friends and be like, this is what I meant when my son was having a baby. I thought it would make her life a little bit easier. And then I got a phone call from Cosmo Magazine, and they were like, we heard your podcast. Could we write about it on our Facebook page? I was like, that sounds great. A few thousand people will hear this story, and maybe it'll change some minds. I don't know if you can see how many views there were on that video they made. It says 1.1 million. So that happened very quickly. And then after this went up, I was like, that's so cool, Cosmo Magazine, man, we have hit the big time. And then while I was asleep in Portland, the Daily Mail, which is the globe's largest tabloid magazine, was hard at work in the UK writing up their own story. And they went back through all of our social media posts that were public and pulled all of our photos and listened to podcasts and wrote this salacious piece that I was horrified by when I woke up in the morning. And I woke up in the morning, I don't know about you, but I'm really bad at decision-making early in the morning. And so I picked up my phone, I've got all these notifications. I was like, oh my God, the Daily Mail wrote about us. What's that? It was a simpler time. And I was like, oh my God, it's been shared 56,000 times. Oh, there are hundreds of comments. I wonder what they say. Okay, well, where were you guys that morning? Because I could have used your help. Because I wasn't thinking right. And I looked, and it was like every horrific, I don't know if you can imagine, like every insecurity you've ever had about yourself, hundreds of strangers saying it on the internet for the entire world to see. And people told me that I looked like a monster, that I looked like a circus freak, that it was fake news. I wasn't really a pregnant man. I was just a really ugly, hairy woman. And then I happened to read one comment where the woman said, as a Christian, I hope you give birth to a dead baby. Because a dead baby is better off than a baby that has to be born to someone like you. And I was 7 months pregnant when I read that. So I was also responsible for nourishing a growing being inside of my body. And I live in a world of rainbows and unicorns. I thought that people were going to be really excited about this story. And I turned to Biff and I was like, this feels bad. And he was raised Pentecostal, and he said, sweetheart, I thought you knew that this is what was going to happen. But then he reminded me what RuPaul says, which is that what other people think of me is none of my business. And this weekend, being the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion, I am reminded of the trans women of color who threw the first bricks and high heels and pennies at Stonewall 50 years ago. And if they could do that, then I could certainly keep going in the face of tiny people on the internet pissing all over me. And we also started to get the most beautiful letters into us. We heard from parents of trans youth saying, oh my God, I never thought I'd be able to be a grandparent. I reminded them that adoption is still a thing and there's nothing magical about having biological children, but I still understood their point. And I heard from trans people saying, thank you for showing that there's more than one way to be a man and more than one way to be trans and more than one way to be a family. And my favorite letter ever was from a woman living in the Midwest who had never met a trans person, but she too had adopted her niece and nephew. And she said she thought it was marvelous that my body was creating new life while also giving me the life that I deserved. And I was like, it's working. You know, some people are getting it. There are rainbows and unicorns out there. And we partnered with reputable outlets to tell our story in as positive and transformative and educational a way as possible. And in the meantime, I was still pregnant and about to give birth. And pregnancy is weird. no matter your gender, it's weird. This is how we make other people. We grow them inside the torsos of other people. It was crazy. But the day came, and I went to the hospital. I called ahead to the head nurse, and I said, hey, I'm a man. She was like, congratulations. It's like, no, I'm coming in to give birth in your hospital today. I'm transgender, and my expectation is that you will make sure that every person who comes into my room, whether they're there to do an IV or to change the trash, will know what to expect when they come in. So I don't have to educate them on top of having a baby. Can you do that? And she said, I'm on it. And she was. And she and my labor team, which was my dad, he cut the cord for me and my sisters. When my older sister had her babies, he cut their cord too. He really wanted to be there. I thought he might be helpful. He was not. He was useless. But it meant a lot to him that he was there. And it came time for me to push, and I thought I was going to die. I was so tired. I'd never been so tired in my whole life. And I turned to Biff, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but I can't do this. And I turned to the midwife, and I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm so sorry. And she got down nose to nose with me, and she said, Trystan, you are doing a good job, a great job. No one on earth is doing as good a job as you are right now. It sounds so stupid, but at the time, it was like a magical spell. I was like, I'm doing the best job, you guys. And they told me to push, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I tried. And then I kept trying. And, my dad was here and Biff was here holding my hands. And then they start yelling at me to stop pushing. And then there's just this wet slurping sound. And then my baby is born. And it's like all the movies, he's like wet and the lights are glinting off of him. And then he opens his mouth and he lets out this cry as if to say, I am here. And then they put him on my chest and he feels like a baby bird. And often people ask me, what can we do to support trans people in all of your glory and all of your power and all of your resilience and your love? And what I tell them is to be part of the story. Be part of telling our story. We need you. Yes, I gave birth to the best baby of all babies. Look at that face. It's so cute. But stories like ours need to be told. Don't just show up for us when it's in a crisis. Show up for us when we invent something that solves a problem, when we win an Emmy Award. Show up for us when we are doing powerful, transformative things, because we are doing powerful, transformative things. And it is so much easier to have an educational conversation around a frame of something good happening. When your uncle shows up in the comment section and is like, well, how does that work? Or whatever. Just a random example I pulled out of my arsenal. It's way easier for you to explain some things about us when it's about something awesome that happens, like Pose being renewed for a 3rd season, or whatever. So much easier for you to tell him what that's all about than when you're sharing a story about something awful that has happened to us. So I invite you all to take a story like mine, to take a story like Laverne Cox and Janet Mock and all the incredible trans people out there that you don't even know yet. But as soon as you open yourself up to them, they will reveal themselves to you. And you will be proud to be a human being on a planet with us. Thank you.